All right. Uh, so you may have noticed I actually work professionally in disaster, so these sorts of things come up, and it's... So I'm going to make a simple proposition for the value of design, and you're at a TED conference, so you might assume that everybody believes design is valuable. Frankly, a lot of people don't, and I've spent a lot of my career arguing against it. So this is me. How did I get here? I'm an architect, a construction manager, a financial analyst, and a builder. Those are the ways that I've made my living. I prefer to think of myself as a writer, a humanitarian, and an activist. And if you look me up on LinkedIn, I describe myself as a low-rent architectural mercenary for good, which I think is kind of the most accurate description. But it shouldn't come as a surprise that I subsume all of these things within the title of the word architect. These are things that I think architects should do in order to be relevant in the world. So my true vocation, actually, is questioning the value of architecture. And that's what I've spent my adult life doing. And that maybe seemed like a funny thing for an architect to do, but I had a little moment back in 2008, and I graduated from graduate school into the worst recession in the history of recessions. And I finished in December of 2008, and there were no jobs to be had, and I had all these great skills, and I had a universe of people who were telling me that they weren't worth anything. So that was a very difficult thing to do, and it was a very difficult thing to explain to my family until I finally found this graph from the Nation, the UK, that was identifying the relative unemployment rates of different professions. And it surveyed 354 separate professions, and the year-over-year improvement, or increase, rather, in unemployment claims amongst all these professions. And I'm a really graphical person, I'm not a statistical person. So I put this in a graph and went on a little voyage of discovery. So what you're looking at is all of the professions listed there, and the red line is the increase between February 2008 and February 2009 of unemployment claims in the UK. And I went on a little process of self-discovery, the general direction of which could be considered downward. So to find myself, I had to keep going, a little farther. Yep. So there's architects. Dead last out of 354 professions. Now this was something that at this point I had spent 10 years of my life trying to become an architect, trying to find a place in this profession because I believed in it so much. And what this told me is that the world didn't believe it. And just to give it a little bit of extra perspective, there's fishmongers, flower arrangers, and financial institution managers. So even the guys who caused the financial crisis aren't actually doing that bad. But we had an 8-fold increase in unemployment claims in architecture, and that's when I realized that the world doesn't always care about design, that the path of an architect is something that we can throw out the window with the first sign of trouble. And this was very hard. You know, I was 31. I was, living in my mom's basement and unemployed. I codified all these thoughts because, as I said, I want to know about the value of architecture, and I want to make that case to the world, which is why I agreed to give this talk. These thoughts were codified in a book that I wrote that attracted a lot of attention. I'm not really sure why. It was basically a book about not working and about what should be the value of architecture, but it got a lot of acclaim, and everybody's got their 15 minutes, and this was mine. In a way, it didn't solve the problem for me, because to me, to create value for something, you have to go out and change the world, not write a book about why you should change the world, and certainly not write a book about not working. And I was rapidly becoming the Seinfeld of architecture, so I moved to Haiti. It didn't happen quite that dramatically, but around the time I finished the book, I got a call from Architecture for Humanity, the organization for whom I now work, and they asked me to go down and lead the Haiti response. And I told them I'd think about it. This was about 3 weeks after the earthquake. And I sat down to do some precedent research, as designers do. And I thought, well, what are Haiti's main problems? Okay, so you got the seismic problem, obviously. You've got the hurricanes, which are frequent and deadly. And you've got extreme poverty. And I literally sat down at my desk and I drew this diagram. And I said, well, how can we think about these precedents? Well, we can locate other countries here. So the USA and Japan, they both deal with seismic issues and with hurricanes, but not with this extreme poverty. And you can start filling this in here. So Bangladesh, Belize, Turkey, Afghanistan, Antigua, Grenada, Congo, Somalia, Argentina. But that didn't quite cover it. I thought there were other problems that I was going to be facing in this design challenge in Haiti. So violence, that's a big one, and that captures a lot of the countries we already noted. Corruption, again, a serious problem, both in Haiti and some of these other countries that we've already talked about. And lo and behold, there's Haiti, right in the middle. And that's when I got it. Haiti was the hardest design problem in the world at that point. And for someone who has spent their life trying to advocate for the value of design, the value of architecture, this seemed like a place that I really wanted to be. I wanted to be there to make a case that an architect and a designer could change the fortunes of thousands of disaster survivors merely through the choices that they make. And that's what I'm going to get into very rapidly. The power of a single design decision. Not a design process or a design product, because too often when we talk about design, we talk about the product. You know, we love talking about Steve Jobs and his iPhone and Frank Gehry and his buildings, and as an afterthought, we investigate the process because we want to be able to duplicate it, right? We want to know what that genius did to make that thing. But the truth is that the process means as much as the product. So what is Haiti's real problem? Well, the real problem is bad buildings. An adage that is very, very common in my line of work, you may have heard it, is that earthquakes don't kill people, buildings do. Poorly built buildings, what you're looking at is a ceiling made of cinder blocks, which sort of shocked me and shocked the people that I was with, and we sort of ordered an evacuation of the school as soon as we were there, and ended up taking it down and building a new school, which I'll show later on. That's a column and a beam that is secured by a bent piece of steel in its tree branch, and it goes on and on. I mean, I have entire hard drives filled of pictures like this. And it's not just Haiti. This picture was taken in Bangladesh a year ago. And I wanted to get some more current pictures. I'm sure you guys see the news, and you saw this article about this building that collapsed in Dhaka a few days ago and killed 400 people. This is a systemic problem in the developing world. And I kept asking myself, well, what are architects doing about it? If an architect wants to do something about it, or anybody wants to do something about it, they've got to get to the root problem. And no, the root problem is not pizza. The root problem is poverty, which I always tend to think of as a pizza. I imagine myself eating a pizza. In fact, I'm doing that right now. With all the trimmings. You know, a deluxe pizza with pepperoni and sausage and everything else and all those things that I like on a pizza. And then I imagine myself a week later with a little less money in my pocket, so I'll settle for a pepperoni pizza. Week goes by, still want a pizza, still no money, so I'm down to cheese pizza. And then another month goes by and things are even worse, so now I'm eating focaccia. And very few of you have ever sitting down and eaten a focaccia and thought, wow, this is poor food. And I'm not a food historian, but I think if you looked it up, you'd find that focaccia was invented by some broke guy who just didn't have the ingredients to make it into something similar. Similar things happen in the built environment. You know how to build a good building, but you don't have the resources to put the important parts in. So you leave out that little bit of steel, that little bit of cement, that little bit of foundation that would make the building safe under those circumstances. This is also focaccia. These are the camps that the international community was putting up in the aftermath of the earthquake. And I call them a focaccia because while they have shelter in the most basic primal sense, they don't have any of those things that create a built environment, like community or sanitation or churches, schools, neighborhoods, anything like that. So how could we set about doing better? Around the same time, we faced a very critical design decision, and it was brought on by an influx in prefabricated housing decisions or applications. And at one point, I had a binder in my desk with about 300 different designs that people had sent us for prefabricated housing solutions that were going to fix Haiti's problem. 1.2 million people homeless, high seismic region, high hurricane region. We needed something that was going to get all these people into shelter. And we got, like I said, literally hundreds of these in all shapes, and shipping containers and yurts and igloos and all sorts of stuff. I don't know what that thing with the cat lady was, but anyway, so we got all of these things, and all of them were very well intentioned. Some of them were very well designed. Some of them even offered to give them to us for free. They would send us free housing units that we could put up and house Haiti's homeless. And this is when our big design decision came up. And this is the simple proposition for the value of design. We made a very serious decision to reject all of it. We decided as a studio that we were going to support Haitians in learning to build with the materials that they were already using. So they were already using block, they were already using concrete, they were using to some extent wood. They were just leaving out the parts of it that made it a real pizza instead of a focaccia. And that was a problem of poverty. So we had to look at a broader design solution. So we decided right then and there that we were going to use these generic everyday materials and we were going to teach. And everything in the Architecture for Humanity studio in Haiti turned into a living laboratory exercise. Everything was an opportunity to teach. So we were out in the field. We were teaching concrete, we were teaching block, we were teaching how to put things together. We subverted everything. We developed a new system of drawings because we wanted our drawings not to function in the sort of way that they do in the United States, where an architect gives a contractor drawings. The contractor builds the building, they both sue each other and argue about it for years and that sort of thing. But we wanted our drawings to be an implement of education. Models. Architects love models, right? We build these fantastic models. We show them to all of our wealthy clients, and we hang them in our office so people can do all the great work that we do. Our models were educational. We used them to teach people how to build, and we built a lot of them. And this is just a quick, scrappy model about how to lay a concrete foundation. Now, where does all this go? What are the real benefits associated with this sort of approach? Well, we can get analytical about it. There's the prefabricated approach on one side, and what I'd like to call a more humanitarian approach on another side. And they both have benefits. So both of them offer 4 walls and a roof, which I think we can agree is the most basic need of a survivor of any sort of catastrophe. Both of them make people feel good, right? Which is the most basic need of anybody who wants to give. That's a lot of why we do this kind of work, because it makes us feel good. But that's kind of where the similarities stop. So the prefab approach generates jobs in Michigan, or wherever these units are built. The humanitarian approach generates jobs in Haiti. Prefab approach generates businesses for US manufacturers, while the humanitarian approach creates businesses for Haitian suppliers and retailers. Jobs in international shipping versus jobs in local trucking. Importantly, perpetuates an aid state versus encouraging ownership. And I think anybody who's worked in the developing world knows that the most pernicious and damaging effects of poverty are the creation of an aid state. It's very easy to turn a man into a beggar if you just keep handing them stuff generation after generation after generation, and they don't want it. They want to own their future. They want to know how to do this stuff. And we have these, thank you. We have these additional benefits that we brought on, creating a skilled workforce, creating equity, preserving culture and heritage, and promotes class mobility. And for those of you who think that this might be some sort of theoretical exercise or might result in some overly utilitarian function, this is what it made. Incredibly beautiful structures all over Haiti, and the studio down there is now up to, I think, 10 schools, 4 clinics, half a dozen community-based plans. They've really had an impact on thousands of people in Haiti. They've created thousands of jobs by making these beautiful things. It's not a compromise between making beautiful architecture and having these secondary and tertiary benefits that actually define a humanitarian approach. This final one used local artisans to import doors, and I included it because it's one of my favorite examples of what I'm talking about. We had the option to import prefabricated screen doors from China at low cost. We decided not to. We employed local Haitian artisans to build all these doors from scratch. So we created jobs. We created a learning environment where Haitian kids can go to school and they can see their culture literally built into the walls every single day that they're going to school. This was made by river rocks that were 50 yards from the site, and bamboo that was from a plantation that was a quarter of a mile away. And they scoffed at the beginning because nobody builds with those sorts of things. But we actually invented new methods and taught new craftsmen how to do these things. So I hope that these final images leave you with a question about design and its process. And if one single design decision can have this sort of impact in terms of creating jobs, creating stability, lifting people out of poverty, giving people a sense of pride, then how does an entire design process, which is made up of thousands of design decisions, hold the same potential? And in your work, whether you're a designer or not, I hope you'll choose the right thing. Thank you.